no man in the rehearsal hall dared put a hand on Tessara's waist. That morning, the performers had watched her break a practice spear across her knee and catch a falling blade by the flat. By sunset, everyone preparing for Salthaven's Festival of Blades had learned the same rule. Do not touch the orc warrior. Jonas Arden walked behind her and lifted his hand anyway. "Stop," Tessara said. His palm halted an inch from the fitted leather at her side. He did not flinch or pretend he had misunderstood. The musician stopped tuning as waves struck the rocks below. Tessara turned her head. She was taller than Jonas by half a hand, with deep olive-green skin, amber eyes, pointed ears, and two small ivory tusks rising from her lower lip. Her black hair had been divided into a dozen tight braids and bound at the nape of her neck with copper wire. A pale scar crossed one brow. The sleeveless red training coat left her powerful arms bare, and the ceremonial sword in her hand looked too light to deserve the name. "You were about to touch me," she said. "Yes." "You admit it easily. Lying would not improve my chances." Her gaze dropped to his raised hand. Jonas had the long, clever fingers of a musician and the shoulders of a man who had once made his living lifting other people above his head. His cream shirt was open at the throat, its sleeves rolled to the elbow. Dark brown hair kept falling over his forehead despite repeated attempts to push it back. He looked 38, perhaps 40, and far too calm for someone standing within reach of Tessara's sword. "Why?" she asked. "Because your center is half a step behind your blade. When the turn begins, you fight the music instead of moving through it." "I have never lost a fight to music." "That is fortunate. Music is vindictive." One of the drummers covered a laugh with a cough. Tessara faced Jonas fully. "And putting your hand on me will solve this terrible defeat? It will show you where the turn begins." He lowered his hand to his side. "But only if you allow it." The last words changed the room. Men had challenged Tessara, saluted her, feared her, obeyed her, and offered loud opinions about what they would do if they ever caught her unarmed. None had asked whether they might touch her. They assumed the answer was death and congratulated themselves for understanding. Jonas simply waited. "Once," she said. He came closer without triumph. The warmth of him reached her before his hand did. "Here?" His fingers hovered beside the narrowest part of her waist. "You have already been given permission." Permission is not a map. Something in her expression shifted. "There." Jonas placed his palm against her waist. The contact was steady, warm, and impossibly ordinary. He did not squeeze. He did not pull her against him. His thumb rested along the lower edge of her ribs, while the rest of his hand spread over the red leather. Tessara's entire body went still, but not in the way it did before violence. Her awareness narrowed to 5 human fingers and the careful distance Jonas maintained between his chest and her back. "Lift the sword," he said quietly. She did. "Your body begins here, not at the blade. Let the waist turn first." He guided her through half a circle. Tessara moved, the sword followed, and the heavy red fabric of her coat opened around her legs. For the first time that afternoon, the turn landed exactly on the drummer's beat. The musician stared. Jonas removed his hand immediately. The absence of it felt sharper than the touch. "Again," Tessara said. "The movement or the hand?" Her amber eyes narrowed. "Choose the answer that lets you keep yours." Jonas smiled. "The movement, then." Salthaven had built the Tide Pavilion on a cliff above the Western Sea. During the Festival of Blades, its circular floor turned above the water while human and orc champions performed the Tide Dance. What began as a way for enemies to display skill without bloodshed now opened 3 days of trade and treaty negotiations. This year, Tessara represented the mountain clans. She had agreed to cross swords with a human partner. She had not agreed to dance with him. The distinction had lasted until Jonas arrived, carrying rolled diagrams, a battered metronome, and the unfortunate belief that an undefeated warrior could learn choreography in 6 days. "From the turn," he called. Tessara returned to her mark. "You will stand farther away." "If I stand any farther away, I will be teaching from the harbor." "The harbor is pleasant at sunset." "So I am told." The musicians began again. Tessara lifted her sword. Jonas approached from behind, but this time he waited. She could feel the question in the space between them. "You may," she said. His hand returned to her waist. The second touch was worse because she expected it. Heat moved beneath the leather as though his palm had discovered a hidden door. He counted near her ear. 3 quick steps. 2 slow. Turn on the rising note. Tessara followed, at first because she refused to fail in front of humans, then because the rhythm began to make sense. The sword no longer led her body. Her body commanded the sword. When the final note faded, Jonas was still behind her. "Better," he said. "Your praise is overwhelming. I save enthusiasm for students who do not threaten my fingers. You volunteered your fingers." A moment of professional recklessness. Tessara looked down at his hand. He noticed and released her at once. Again, she disliked how quickly he obeyed. Before we continue, if you enjoy original fantasy romances about unlikely people learning to trust one another, you can support the channel and hear more stories at https://www.patreon.com/cw/talesfromorc. Now, back to Tessara and Jonas. The rehearsal ended after dark. The musicians escaped first. The dancers followed, carrying practice weapons and whispering about the moment Jonas Arden had touched the red shield of the north and survived. Tessara remained beside the open arch, watching moonlight divide itself across the waves. Jonas collected his diagrams from the floor. "You know they have begun taking bets." "On whether I kill you?" "On how many rehearsals I survive." "What are the odds?" "Poor. I may place money against myself." She almost smiled. He was beginning to recognize the small movement at the corner of her mouth and looked pleased whenever he caused it. That alone should have made her leave. Instead, she said, "You did not ask why." Jonas stopped rolling the final page. "Why what?" "Why no man touches me." Everyone asks eventually, usually from a safe distance. "Would you answer?" "No." "Then I have saved us both time." Tessara turned from the sea. "You are not curious?" "Very. Curiosity is not permission." He tucked the diagrams beneath one arm and lifted the metronome with the other. It was an ugly wooden box repaired with brass hinges, the sort of object a person kept because replacing it would feel like betrayal. "Tomorrow at sunrise," he said. "Wear boots that bend." "These bend." "The floor disagrees." She looked at his soft black dance shoes. "Those would lose an argument with a puddle." "Then we should both avoid arguments with puddles." He bowed, not deeply enough to mock her, and walked toward the doors. "Jonas." He looked back. Tessara had intended to warn him not to repeat what happened. Instead, she heard herself say, "When you touch me tomorrow, keep your thumb higher. The sword belt presses there." For once, the human had no clever answer. His eyes moved to her waist and returned to her face. "Higher," he said. "Understood." After he left, Tessara stood alone in the tide pavilion, with the sea speaking below. She pressed her own palm to the place his had rested. It felt nothing like his. At sunrise, Jonas found Tessara standing in the center of the pavilion, wearing boots that could have survived a siege. He set down his papers. I admire consistency. They bend. Ships bend. That does not make them suitable footwear for dancing. She tossed him a practice sword. He caught it badly, nearly lost the metronome, and recovered with what he probably imagined was dignity. Your hands are slower in the morning, she observed. My hands expected courtesy. Then your hands are poorly trained. He placed a cloth bundle at her feet. Inside lay a pair of soft red boots with thin leather soles, reinforced toes, and copper stitching around the ankles. They were not decorative. Someone had studied her old boots closely enough to understand where armor ended and flexibility began. Tessara looked from the boots to Jonas. You had these made overnight? I altered them overnight. A costumer made them last month for a performer with your approximate feet and none of your patience. You know the size of my feet? I know the distance between every mark you missed yesterday. Your feet supplied the remaining information. She should have refused. Instead, she sat on the edge of the stage, removed her boots, and tried his. They fit. Jonas did not comment on the knife strapped above her ankle. He did not comment on the old scars crossing the top of her foot. He knelt only to adjust a loose copper cord, then paused before touching it. May I? Tessara stared at him. It is a boot. Attached to you. Yes. He tightened the cord. His knuckles brushed her ankle once, lightly enough that she could have mistaken it for the leather. She did not. The morning rehearsal began with footwork and ended with an argument about falling. The tide dance contained 7 passages. 6 were built from old battle forms: advance, challenge, circle, exchange, surrender, and return. Tessara understood each after seeing it once. The 5th passage was called the Trusting Fall, which she declared a foolish name for a foolish movement. You turn away from me, Jonas explained, and lean backward. I catch you at the waist. Or I strike the floor. That is why I catch you. What if you do not? Then you may kill me after you recover. If I strike my head, I may forget your face. I will draw a picture. She stared until he sighed. We begin with half the distance, he said. No music, no audience. You decide when. Tessara turned her back to him. It was not the same as turning away from an enemy. An enemy followed rules she knew. Jonas stood close enough that she heard his quiet breath and the soft scrape of his shoes. He did not touch her. Ready, he said. Do not announce it. How will you know I am ready? If you are not, we discover it together. She leaned. His arms caught her before fear had time to disguise itself as anger. One hand closed at her waist, the other supported her upper back. Tessara's braid swept across his forearm. For an instant, she lay diagonally against him, face turned toward the ceiling, throat exposed, sword arm useless. Jonas held her as if her weight were information rather than burden. Again, she said, you are still in my arms. She looked up at him. From that angle, his gray eyes appeared almost blue. A faint line ran from the corner of his mouth into his beard, the remnant of an old cut. His grip remained firm. His pulse did not. Then let go, she said. He brought her upright and released her. Again, she repeated. They practiced until the fall became a conversation. At first, Tessara counted every breath. Then she began to listen for the slight shift of his feet behind her. Jonas learned that she leaned farther when he said nothing. Tessara learned that he always caught her on the exhale. By noon, he could lower her until the ends of her braids brushed the floor. The pavilion workers pretended not to watch. During their break, Tessara sat on the seawall and ate bread filled with grilled peppers. Jonas sat beside her, leaving a respectful hand's width between their hips. "You were a dancer," she said. "I remain one on official documents. You do not move like the others." That sounded almost kind. The others watch themselves. You watch the room. Jonas tore his bread in half. "I was a lifting partner. Festivals, royal halls, theaters. I made beautiful people appear to fly. And now you teach warriors to fall. A natural decline." She waited. He rubbed the heel of his right hand. Tessara had noticed the stiffness there whenever he gripped a sword. 7 years ago, a platform collapsed during a performance. I caught my partner, but the chain wrapped around this wrist. It never closed properly afterward. I could still dance. I could not promise to lift someone safely every night. Did your partner blame you? No. That would have been easier. She thanked me, married a baker, and became intolerably happy. You dislike bakers? I distrust anyone who is awake before sunrise by choice. Tessara glanced at the red boots. You were awake before sunrise. I was not happy about it. Below them, fishing boats entered the harbor beneath striped sails. The city was already dressing itself for the festival. Copper ribbons crossed the streets. Human merchants displayed mountain salt beside orc metalwork. Children practiced mock duels with reeds. For 3 days each year, Salthaven behaved as though a century of peace were simple. Why did they choose you? Jonas asked. Tessara's jaw tightened. You may tell me it is not my concern, he added. It is not. Excellent. The answer remains available if that changes. She ate another bite. He did not fill the silence. Because I never lose control, she said at last. That is what my commanders told the council. Humans have stories about orc tempers. The clans wanted a champion who would give them no new ones. And do you never lose control? No. You broke a spear yesterday. I intended to break it. A valuable distinction. It is the only distinction that matters. Jonas studied her without making the study feel like inspection. Then why does everyone think touching you would end badly? Tessara looked toward the harbor. Because the first man who tried lost 3 teeth. Jonas stopped chewing. He came behind me in a tavern and put both hands where he had not been invited. He had heard I was difficult to surprise. He wanted to prove otherwise. 3 teeth seems restrained. She turned to him. There was no amusement in his face now. Only anger, quiet and clean, directed nowhere near her. The next man wanted to prove he was braver than the first, she continued. I broke his wrist. After that, the story grew without my help. Men began saying no one had ever touched Tessara and lived. It was useful, but untrue. My mother touched me, my sisters, healers when necessary, warriors in battle. No man you welcomed? She looked at his hand resting between them on the wall. No. Jonas turned his palm upward, but did not move it closer. The offer was so simple that suspicion could find nothing to hold. Tessara placed her green hand in his. His fingers closed gently. No lesson required it. No choreography justified it. They sat above the sea, holding hands, like 2 ordinary people who had not spent their lives becoming difficult to reach. Is this useful? She asked. Professionally? Not at all. Good. She left her hand there until the musicians returned. On the 3rd rehearsal, the festival council came to observe. They arrived in embroidered coats and expressions of cultivated concern. The chief counselor watched Tessara and Jonas complete the crossing blades passage, then consulted quietly with the others. "Skilled," he said. "Very skilled. But the tide dance is meant to embody trust between our peoples. This looks like a duel in which both participants have misplaced their anger." "It was a duel for 80 years, Tessara said. "The audience expects warmth. They should stand nearer the torches." Jonas stepped between diplomacy and disaster. "We have 3 days remaining. The closeness comes later in the choreography." The counselor examined the space between them. "See that it does." Last year's dancers kissed at the conclusion. Tessara's practice sword turned slightly in her hand. Jonas noticed. Then last year's dancers were free to make that choice. The crowd adored it. The crowd may purchase wine, it may not purchase her mouth. Silence spread across the pavilion. Tessara looked at Jonas. He had answered without consulting her. Yet he had not spoken for her desire. He had defended the absence of obligation. The counselor's smile became thin. "Just make them believe you trust one another." After the delegation left, Tessara set down her sword. "You argued with the man paying you," she said. "He is paying me to design a dance, not sell pieces of you with the tickets. You could have promised him a kiss. Would you have given one? No. Then I would have been lying. We established yesterday that lying does not improve my chances." She circled him slowly. Jonas followed her with his eyes, uncertain whether he was being evaluated or hunted. "What does the crowd need to believe?" she asked. "That when you place a blade near my throat, you know precisely where it will stop. That when you fall, you know I will catch you. That when I touch your waist, you want me there." The last sentence settled between them. "And how do we make them believe that?" Jonas's gaze moved over her face. "We stop pretending it is only acting." Tessara took one step closer. The air changed. No opponent had ever gone still in quite the way Jonas did. "Your lesson," she said. "Continue it." He moved behind her. His hand paused beside her waist. "Higher," she reminded him. His palm settled beneath her ribs. This time Tessara leaned back before the music began. They stopped rehearsing for the council. For the next 2 hours, Jonas removed every movement designed only to impress. The high lift became a grounded turn. The false strike became a slow exchange in which Tessara laid her sword across his open hands. The final bow became something quieter. His hand at her waist, her blade lowered between them. Both faces turned toward the other rather than the audience. "People will say it is less exciting," Tessara said. "People who need explosions to recognize trust should not be placed near swords. There are fireworks at the end. Then we have protected the simple-minded." She laughed before she could stop herself. The sound startled a flock of white seabirds from the pavilion roof. Jonas missed the next count, and Tessara caught his wrist before his practice sword wandered into the wrong passage. "You were distracted," she said. "I had not heard you laugh. You have now. Recover." "I am attempting to." His eyes stayed on her mouth a moment too long. The warmth in Tessara's face had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. She released his wrist and moved to her starting mark. They practiced the ending. Jonas stood close. His right hand found her waist, exactly where she had shown him. Tessara placed one hand on his shoulder and held her sword low with the other. On the final 3 beats, they turned together, while the bronze stage moved beneath their feet. When the music stopped, his face was inches from hers. Neither stepped away. "The crowd will believe this," Tessara said. "Will they? Your heart is loud enough for the front row. A flaw in the pavilion's acoustics." "Of course." Her thumb rested against the side of his neck. She had placed it there as part of the ending, The music no longer gave her a reason to leave it. Jonas's hand tightened once at her waist, then relaxed. Tessara, you say my name as though it is a warning. It may be one for me. Before she could answer, the pavilion doors opened, and the costume master entered with 4 assistants carrying formal clothes. Tessara removed her hand so quickly it looked like a strike. The silver-haired costume master circled Tessara, assessed her training coat, and declared that the council would faint from boredom. They may faint quietly, Tessara said. You will wear this. The assistants revealed a deep red leather coat cut close through the waist and open for movement. Copper scales covered one shoulder, while the other remained bare. It was made for a warrior and designed to ensure the audience noticed she was a woman. Jonas became very interested in the metronome. Tessara noticed. Something wrong with the costume? She asked. I have not seen it worn. You have an imagination. An increasingly inconvenient one. The silver-haired woman removed the pins from her mouth. He used to be more discreet. You know him well? Tessara asked. I have undressed half his dance company. Jonas closed the metronome with unnecessary force. For fittings. Usually. The assistants laughed. Tessara did not. The costume master smiled like someone discovering loose thread. We will fit the champion behind the screens. Jonas, try not to walk into the sea. He left carrying the wrong roll of diagrams. The fitting took an hour. Tessara emerged wearing the red coat, fitted black trousers and copper bracers polished to mirror brightness. Her braids had been released, combed and woven again, so that thin copper chains moved between them. She felt exposed without being uncovered. The costume did not disguise her strength. It framed it. Jonas waited by the sea wall with his back turned. You may look, she said. He turned. The expression on his face was worth every pin. His gaze moved from the copper at her shoulder to the shape of the coat at her waist, then returned with disciplined speed to her eyes. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The acoustics again? She asked. Severe problems. Is it unsuitable? For my concentration, completely. Tessara walked toward him. The new boots made no sound. We should test the movement. We should test it somewhere with witnesses. You believe witnesses will protect you? No. I believe embarrassment might. She took his hand and placed it on her waist. Jonas inhaled. The fabric is thicker, she said. Does it interfere with your grip? His fingers curved over the red leather. You know it does not. Then demonstrate. The pavilion was nearly empty. The late sun poured through the western arches and turned the floor gold. No musicians remained, so Jonas counted beneath his breath. Tessara followed the sound. They moved slowly at first, learning the coat's weight and the small changes in balance created by the copper shoulder. Then Jonas turned her, caught her, and drew her back against him with more confidence than he had shown before. The final position left his chest against her back. Tessara felt every breath. Still professional? She asked. Not remotely. She turned within his arm. Good. The pavilion bell rang before either of them closed the final distance. One harsh note announced the treaty reception beginning in the upper city. Jonas rested his forehead briefly against hers. I have never hated a bell. You repair instruments, break it later. A reasonable compromise. At the reception, 200 guests shared wine beneath glass lanterns, while an orchestra played music too delicate for the amount of armor in the room. Tessara wore the red ceremonial coat. Jonas arrived separately in a dark, formal coat because the council wanted their appearance together saved for the festival. Tessara disliked that decision. Humans approached to praise Tessara's victories without coming within arm's reach. One asked whether orcs truly slept with weapons beneath their pillows. "Only when humans are visiting," she told him. Across the room, the costume master adjusted Jonas's collar, made him laugh, and kept one hand on his chest. Tessara's wine cup cracked. One of the clan delegates looked at the broken stem between her fingers. "Poor glass." "Very. Should we move the human woman somewhere safer?" Tessara gave him a cold look. He hid his smile in his drink. Jonas noticed her watching. His laughter faded. He said something to the costume master, crossed the crowded hall, and stopped at the usual respectful distance. "The glass offended you?" he asked. "It lacked discipline." "I have met glasses like that." His gaze moved to the red wine on her green fingers. He took a white cloth from his pocket, but waited. Tessara held out her hand. He wiped the wine from her palm. The act was small and public. Conversations changed around them. No man touched Tessara. Everyone knew this. Yet Jonas held her hand beneath the chandeliers as calmly as he had, above the sea wall. "You were being fitted?" Tessara asked. "My collar was crooked." Her hand was low for a collar. His mouth curved. "Were you measuring?" "Warriors measure threats." "Is she a threat?" "Is she?" "No." The answer came without teasing. Tessara looked at him. "Then why was she touching you?" "Because she wanted to see whether you would break another glass." Across the room, the costume master lifted her cup in salute. Tessara's eyes narrowed. "I may break something more expensive. She will consider that a victory." The orchestra shifted into a common harbor dance. Couples moved toward the center of the hall. Jonas folded the wine-stained cloth and placed it aside. Then he offered Tessara his hand. "No," she said. "You have not heard the question. You intend to dance. I intend to ask. Everyone will watch. They are already watching. At present, they are only less entertained." Tessara looked around the room. Humans pretended to inspect paintings. Orc delegates suddenly found the musicians fascinating. Every gaze returned to Jonas's open hand. "This is not the tide dance," she said. "No swords, no counsel, no purpose at all." "Why should I agree?" His gray-blue eyes held hers. "Because I want to dance with you." The directness entered deeper than charm could have. Tessara placed her hand in his. Jonas led her among the couples. He did not begin until she nodded. Then one hand settled at her waist, high enough to avoid the sword belt she was not wearing. Tessara rested her palm on his shoulder. They moved. The harbor dance was simpler than the ceremonial one, built for crowded rooms and people carrying secrets. Jonas guided without pushing. Tessara discovered that following was not surrender when she could stop at any time. On the third turn, she stepped closer. On the fourth, her body brushed his from chest to thigh. His count faltered. "Distracted again," she murmured. "The costume remains a problem. You could remove it?" Jonas missed an entire step. Tessara caught him at the waist before he stumbled into another couple. He stared at her. "Later," she added. His hand tightened at her side. "You are cruel." "I have several medals confirming it." They danced through 3 songs. No one interrupted. By the final one, Tessara had forgotten the room beyond Jonas's shoulder. She knew the pressure of each finger through the red leather. She knew the tiny crease beside his left eye when he smiled. She knew he smelled of cedar, clean linen, and the metal dust used on stage tracks. When the music ended, applause spread through the hall. Tessara's body hardened. Jonas felt it. He did not bow to the audience. He kept his eyes on her and released her waist. "They were not part of it," he said. "No. Would you like to leave?" She should have said yes. Instead, she took his hand and returned it to the place he had just released. "One more," she said. The orchestra had stopped. Jonas smiled slowly. "There is no music. Count." So he did. The following morning, Jonas was not waiting in the pavilion. A human warrior stood in his place. He wore polished sea blue armor and carried the curved ceremonial saber assigned to the human champion. Tessara had seen him at the opening feast, with one arm bound beneath his coat. The arm was free now, although stiffness remained in the shoulder. The chief counselor stood beside him, wearing satisfaction like a second robe. "Excellent news," the counselor said. "Our appointed champion has been cleared by the healers. Master Arden's instruction has prepared you admirably, but the proper representatives may now perform." Tessara looked at Jonas's abandoned metronome near the musicians. "Where is he?" "Reviewing the stage machinery." "Did he know?" The counselor hesitated only slightly. "He was hired as choreographer and temporary partner. Naturally, he understood." "Naturally." Tessara turned to the armored champion. He bowed respectfully and kept both hands where she could see them. "I have studied the sequence," he said. "I am honored." "Show me the trusting fall." The man looked at the counselor. "Catch me," Tessara said. She turned her back and leaned without warning. The champion caught her. His stance was strong. His hands landed correctly. Every part of the movement succeeded. It felt entirely wrong. Tessara came upright and stepped out of his arms. "Again?" he asked. "No." She crossed the pavilion to the bronze outer track. Jonas lay beneath the raised edge of the stage with a wrench between his teeth and half his body inside the mechanism. Tessara kicked the sole of his shoe. His head appeared. "Good morning." "You knew." Jonas removed the wrench. "His healer sent word last night." "Before or after you danced with me?" The question landed harder than she intended. He slid from beneath the stage and stood. A streak of black grease crossed his cheek. "Before." Tessara's hand closed around the rail. "You should have told me." "Yes." She had prepared for excuses and found none to strike. "Why did you not?" "Because you said one more. Because there was no music, and you asked me to count. Because I wanted one evening that did not end the moment my employment did. None of those are good reasons." "No." "I am sorry." Tessara looked toward the appointed champion. He was practicing alone, careful and precise. The council would approve of him. The audience would understand him. He could place his hands exactly where Jonas had placed his and never make her forget the next count. "You built the dance for him," she said. "I built it for you. He was meant to learn the other half. But you learned it. Someone had to stand there. Is that all you did? Stand there?" Jonas's eyes changed. "No." The answer hurt because it was honest and insufficient. "Leave the pavilion," Tessara said. He nodded. "If that is what you want." He began gathering his tools. She hated him for obeying. She hated herself more for wanting him to resist after demanding for days that he respect every boundary she set. "Stop," she said. Jonas stopped. "You will finish repairing the track. Then you will teach him. You were paid to do both." "Tessara, do not use my name to make this gentle." He lowered his gaze. "As you wish." The rehearsal lasted 4 miserable hours. The human champion learned quickly. Tessara performed perfectly. Jonas stood at the edge with folded arms, correcting angles and counts in a voice that revealed nothing. When the champion touched her waist, Tessara felt pressure and warmth and no danger at all. She also felt no desire to step closer. During the final passage, she stopped. "Again," Jonas called. "No." The counselor frowned from his chair. "Is there a problem?" "Yes," Tessara said. "This is not my partner." The human champion immediately stepped back. He looked relieved rather than insulted. "He is the appointed representative," the counselor said. "Then appoint another. Master Arden is not a warrior." Tessara drew her ceremonial sword and sent it spinning across the pavilion. Jonas caught the handle with his left hand. Surprise nearly cost him the blade, but he recovered before it struck the floor. "He can learn," she said. The counselor stood. "The performance is in 2 days. He taught me to dance in 3. I will teach him not to stab himself in 2. This is not how representatives are chosen." The armored champion cleared his throat. "The charter requires 1 willing human and 1 willing orc selected by their delegations. It says nothing about military rank." Everyone looked at him. He shrugged carefully with his healing shoulder. "I read things while injured." The counselor's face reddened. Tessara walked toward Jonas. "Are you willing?" He held her sword between them. "You told me to finish my employment. I am changing the terms. Because the dance feels wrong with him? Because it is ours." The pavilion became so quiet that the sea seemed to climb the cliffs. Jonas searched her face. "And after the festival?" "The dance ends. We do not have to." He turned the sword in his hand and offered it back hilt first. "Then I am willing." The counselor left to discover whether laws could be edited by shouting at them. The human champion removed his blue armor and spent the next hour teaching Jonas the saber sequence. After watching the first attempt, he told Tessara she had chosen a project of historic difficulty. "He is lighter on his feet than you," Tessara said. "So are most goats." Jonas lowered the sword. "I preferred you when you were silent." "I have never been silent. I preferred the possibility." The champion left them before noon with strict instructions regarding Jonas's vulnerable right side. Tessara closed the pavilion doors. "Why are we alone?" Jonas asked. "You are easily embarrassed. I am developing a powerful sense of danger." She moved behind him. "Lift the saber." He did. Tessara placed one hand over his left wrist and the other at his waist. Jonas went still. "Your center is behind your blade," she said near his ear. "I have heard that somewhere. Let the waist turn first." She guided him through the same half-circle he had taught her. His back moved against her chest. The dark coat was gone. Only the thin cream shirt separated her palm from the heat of his body. "Better," she said. "Your praise is overwhelming." Again. She kept her hand at his waist for the next turn and the one after. Jonas learned slowly with the blade and quickly with everything else. When Tessara adjusted his shoulders, he leaned into her fingers. When she corrected his stance with her knee between his breath changed. Neither pretended not to notice. After an hour, his right wrist began to shake. "Enough," Tessara said. "The sequence is not complete. Your hand is. It will recover. After rest." He attempted another cut. The saber slipped. Tessara caught it and threw it safely across the floor. "You tell others to trust you, yet you refuse to trust me when I say stop." Jonas cradled his wrist. "That is unfair." "Yes. Is it also untrue?" He looked away. She took his hand and led him to the sea wall. A basin of cold water stood beside the musician's platform. Tessara knelt, placed his wrist in the water, and held it there. "I was replaced because this hand failed once," he said. "You were injured saving someone. The audience remembers only that I stopped appearing. The audience has a short memory. You are preparing to stand before 10,000 of them. I am preparing to stand with you. They happen to be nearby." Jonas stared at her bowed head. Her braids slid over one bare shoulder, the copper chains warm in the sunlight. He lifted his free hand toward them, then stopped. Tessara saw the movement. "You may." He touched one braid, running it carefully between his fingers. "Does the copper mean something?" "Each link is a command I survived. There are many. Commanders are generous with commands. And the empty spaces? Decisions I made myself." He found a gap near the end of the braid. "This one? Coming to Salthaven. Another gap. This? Letting you touch me." His fingers stopped. Tessara raised her face. "Do you regret last night?" "Only the part where I did not tell you the truth." "Do you want the costume master?" Jonas blinked. "No." "Any of the dancers?" "No." "The baker's wife?" "I believe her husband would object." "Answer." He pulled his wrist from the water. Droplets ran over both their hands. "I want the woman who threatens furniture when she is jealous. The glass was poorly made. I want the woman who pretends she does not laugh. She sounds exhausting. She is." Tessara rose without releasing his hand. Jonas stood with her. They were close enough that the wet sleeve of his shirt touched the red leather at her waist. "What else?" she asked. "I want to kiss her." Her amber eyes held his. "That is not a request." Jonas understood. "May I kiss you?" Tessara's heart struck once, hard enough to move armor that was not there. "No," she said. Pain crossed his face before he could hide it. She placed his damp hand against her waist. "Not because you asked after I demanded it. Ask when you cannot blame the answer on a lesson." Jonas breathed slowly. "You make this difficult." "I make it mine." His expression softened. "Yes, you do." They returned to training. By evening, Jonas could complete every blade passage at half speed. Tessara corrected him with relentless attention and increasingly unnecessary contact. She guided his wrist from behind. She pressed her palm to his stomach to stop him overreaching. She held his hips square through the final turn. Each time, she gave him the same opportunity to move away that he had always given her. He never did. Rain arrived after sunset. It swept through the open arches in silver curtains, drumming on the pavilion roof and turning the horizon into a wall of dark water. The musicians had gone. The stage workers had warned that the outer track should not move while wet. But Tessara and Jonas continued on the inner circle beneath the lanterns. They practiced without weapons. 3 quick steps, 2 slow, turn. The rain cooled Tessara's bare shoulder. Jonas's cream shirt became transparent along his chest and clung to the muscle beneath. She missed a count while looking. "Distracted," he said. "Your shirt is unsuitable." "For the weather." "For my concentration." His smile came slowly. They turned again. Jonas caught her at the waist and drew her close. Water ran from his hair into his beard. Tessara lifted one hand and wiped it from his mouth with her thumb. The gesture silenced them both. There was no counsel, no audience, no lesson left in the movement. Only rain, warm lanterns, and Jonas's hand exactly where she wanted it. She waited. Jonas searched her face, then began to release her. Tessara caught the front of his wet shirt. "I am not stepping away," he said. "You are removing your hand." "I thought you wanted me to ask when it was not a lesson." "Then ask." His thumb moved once against her waist. "May I kiss you, Tessara?" "Yes." He kissed her carefully at first. Care lasted less than a breath. Tessara pulled him closer by the shirt and kissed him with the same certainty she brought to battle. Jonas's arm tightened around her waist, while his other hand rose to the back of her neck. His mouth found the shape between her tusks without hesitation. The kiss deepened, warm and rain-sweet, until the floor, the festival, and every watching city window ceased to matter. No man had ever touched Tessara like this, not because he was braver than the others, because she had asked him to stay. When they finally separated, Jonas rested his forehead against hers. His breathing was uneven. "Was that sufficiently separate from the lesson?" he asked. "No." Alarm appeared in his eyes. Tessara kissed him again. "Now it is." They sheltered in the costume room when the rain became too strong to cross the upper bridge. The room smelled of wool, cedar chests, and the faint lavender used to keep moths from ceremonial robes. Jonas lit a small iron stove. Tessara removed the soaked red coat and hung it near the heat, then watched him make a heroic effort to keep his eyes on the fire. She wore a black training vest beneath it. The garment covered everything it needed to and revealed exactly how much strength the coat had framed. Water traced the green curve of her shoulders and disappeared beneath the fitted cloth. "Your concentration remains poor," she said. "The weather has damaged it. Remove your shirt." Jonas looked at her. "It is wet," she added. "Of course." "Did you imagine another reason?" "Several. None suitable for a costume room owned by the council." He pulled the cream shirt over his head. Tessara had known he was strong. Knowing did not prepare her for the broad lines of his chest or the old dancer's muscles along his stomach. A pale rope scar circled his right wrist and continued halfway up his forearm. Another marked his ribs, where the collapsed platform had struck him. Jonas caught her looking. "The costume is unsuitable." "There is no costume." "Then I have identified the problem." She came closer and touched the scar at his ribs. He drew a breath, but did not move. Her fingertips followed the pale line, not because medicine required it, not because choreography provided an excuse. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "Only when a beautiful orc examines it with a threatening expression." "Then constantly." "Since you arrived, yes." Tessara placed her palm flat against his chest. His heart beat beneath it, fast and honest. Jonas covered her hand with his. "May I?" he asked. His gaze moved to the bare curve of her shoulder. "Yes." He touched her as though strength could be precious. His fingers followed the line from her shoulder to her upper arm, tracing scars she had stopped noticing years ago. When he reached the largest, on the silver groove left by an axe near her collarbone, his mouth tightened. "Do not pity me," she said. "I do not." "Then what is that expression?" "Gratitude that you survived long enough to terrify me." She kissed him before he could improve the answer. The second kiss was slower. Jonas's hands explored only where she guided them. Her waist, the strong plane of her back, the damp braids resting against her neck. Tessara learned the texture of his beard beneath her fingers and the small sound he made when she drew him closer. Heat from the stove gathered around them while rain covered the roof. They did not turn the night into a promise neither was ready to define. They sat on folded stage curtains beneath one dry cloak, Tessara against Jonas's bare chest, his arm around her waist. They spoke until the fire became embers. He told her he had stayed in Salthaven because the sea was the only thing that kept rhythm without needing him to count. She told him she had accepted every command given to her until she could no longer distinguish discipline from disappearance. "The first time I refused an order," she said, "my commander told me no one would know what to do with me if I was not useful. What did you do? Became even more useful. Jonas's arm tightened. That was not the lesson he intended. No. And now? Tessara looked down at his hand across her waist. Now I am learning to want things that serve no one. Such as? She turned her face and kissed the corner of his mouth. Your concentration is poor. They slept for an hour before dawn. Fully clothed except for his drying shirt, her head on his shoulder and his hand remaining at her waist, even in sleep. The storm left damage behind. At first light, Jonas inspected the Tide Pavilion's bronze track and found seawater beneath the western bearings. 3 iron teeth had cracked. The floor would still turn, but under the weight of musicians, dancers, and ceremonial braziers, the damaged section might lock without warning. Postpone the performance, Tessara said. The chief counselor looked toward the harbor, already crowded with ships. The treaty expires at sunset. Delegations leave tomorrow. The ceremony must occur today. Then perform it on fixed ground. The turning stage represents 2 peoples sharing one horizon. A broken neck represents poor judgment. Jonas knelt beside the exposed bearing. We can reduce the load. Remove the braziers and half the musicians. Keep the outer ring closed to spectators. Can you make it safe? Tessara asked. He met her eyes. Safer, not safe. She appreciated the distinction. The counselor agreed to the changes only after Tessara threatened to announce the damage herself. Workers spent the morning reinforcing the track. Jonas marked the dangerous western quarter with a small copper line visible only to them. If the stage catches, he explained, do not fight the stop. The force will continue through our bodies. Ben turned toward me and let me take part of it. Your wrist cannot take part of it. Then we share the weakness as well as the strength. Tessara touched the copper gap in her braid that represented choosing him. You said the dance ends. At the final note. What happens after? Jonas closed the track panel and stood. I have been afraid to ask. Ask now. He wiped grease from his fingers. Stay in Salthaven after the festival. Not forever. Not because the council needs another symbol. Stay long enough to discover whether we still want each other when no one is applauding. And if I do, I will show you every place in the city where the food is better than the music. You will insult my teaching. I will repair your terrible boots. We may argue beside the sea. That sounds dangerously close to happiness. I have been warned about it. Tessara placed his hand at her waist and stepped into him. I will stay until the first snow. The first snow rarely reaches Salthaven. Then you understand the terms. He laughed and kissed her beneath the silent festival banners. By sunset, 10,000 people surrounded the Tide Pavilion. Human ships filled the bay with blue sails. Orc banners climbed the cliff in red and copper lines. The remaining musicians occupied the eastern platform, their drums and horns arranged to keep weight away from the damaged bearings. Rain clouds still darkened the horizon, but the western sky had opened enough for sunlight to strike the wet white stone. Tessara waited behind the northern doors in her ceremonial coat. The deep red leather fitted her body. Copper scales covered one shoulder, and her braids fell heavy down her back. She carried a curved orc blade with its edge dulled for ritual. Jonas stood opposite her dressed in a dark blue coat over a fresh cream shirt. The human saber rested at his hip. His right wrist was bound beneath the sleeve. Your heart is loud, Tessara said. The audience has damaged the acoustics. Of course. The opening horns sounded. Jonas offered his hand. May I dance with you? Tessara placed her green hand in his. You may try. The doors opened. They entered from opposite sides as tradition required. hands separating only when the crowd could see them. The rotating floor began to move. The sea appeared and vanished between the arches, while the pavilion carried them around one another. The first passage was the advance. Jonas drew his saber. Tessara answered. Their blades met once, twice, then slid apart in a shower of harmless sparks. He moved lightly, every step learned during the previous day, and transformed by the confidence of standing before an audience again. The second passage was the challenge. Tessara drove him backward with 6 measured strikes. Jonas turned beneath the final one and came to her side. The crowd gasped when his hand settled at her waist. Tessara heard the sound and ignored it. "Higher," she whispered. His thumb shifted beneath her ribs. They turned together. The musicians drove them into the circle in exchange. Copper chains flashed in Tessara's braids. Jonas's dark coat opened behind him. Their blades crossed above their heads while the white stage rotated against the blue sea. At the western quarter, Jonas saw the copper warning line. "Ready," he murmured. "Do not announce it." The floor reached the damaged bearing. Nothing happened. They completed the passage. The crowd cheered. Tessara saw relief flicker across Jonas's face. Then a wave struck the cliff beneath the pavilion. The bronze track locked. The stage stopped so violently that musicians slid from their stools. One horn rolled across the floor. Jonas and Tessara were moving in opposite directions when the force struck. His right foot lost contact. His injured wrist twisted as he attempted to recover. Tessara caught him around the waist. For one suspended instant, the human dancer hung in the orc warrior's arms before 10,000 silent people. "I thought you caught me," he said through clenched teeth. The terms changed. The Western support groaned. Jonas looked toward the track. "It will release all at once." "What do we do?" "Keep moving." The musicians had stopped. The chief counselor was waving frantically from the safe platform. Guards moved toward the stage, but the rotating bridge had jammed between them. Tessara set Jonas upright. "Count." He understood. "3 quick," he said. They moved without music. Too slow. Their blades crossed. 3 quick. Tessara turned under his arm, then reversed and guided him away from the cracked section. The drummer nearest them recognized the pattern and struck the rhythm. Another joined. Horns returned one by one. The audience's fear changed into attention. Jonas and Tessara continued the tide dance on a stage that no longer turned. Instead, they circled each other, creating the missing horizon with their bodies. When the damaged mechanism shuddered, they bent together. When it released half a foot, they used the force to drive the next turn. They were no longer performing the old choreography. They were listening. Jonas's wrist failed during the crossing blade's passage. His saber dipped. Tessara caught his forearm, supported the weakened joint, and completed the movement with both their hands around the weapon. The audience saw it. Not a flawless human rescuing a dangerous orc. Not an invincible orc carrying a fragile human. 2 people adjusting before failure could become a fall. The final passage approached. The trusting fall. Jonas moved behind Tessara. His hand hovered at her waist, exactly as it had during the first rehearsal. The entire pavilion seemed to remember the stories about her. No man touched Tessara. No man survived trying. She turned her head. "What are you waiting for?" "Permission." The answer reached only her. Tessara smiled. "Hold me." His hand closed around her waist. She fell. Jonas caught her with one arm while she extended the red blade toward the sea. His injured wrist shook, but Tessara kept 1 foot beneath herself, sharing the weight he could not carry alone. They held the position as the final horn rose. The bronze track released. The stage turned, Sunlight broke beneath the clouds and crossed Tessara's green face. Jonas brought her upright. The choreography required them to separate, present their swords and bow to their respective delegations. They did not. Tessara lowered her blade. She put one hand behind Jonas's neck and kissed him in the center of the turning stage. For half a heartbeat, 10,000 people forgot how to react. Then the Tide Pavilion shook again, not from broken machinery, but from applause. Jonas kissed her back, one hand firm at her waist, the other careful around her copper-bound braids. Tessara smiled against his mouth. There was no council order in the kiss, no promise made for spectators, no role that required it. The crowd could watch. The choice remained theirs. The treaty was signed at dusk. The council later described the locked stage as a planned demonstration of cooperation. Tessara offered to demonstrate cooperation by throwing the chief counselor into the harbor. Jonas persuaded her that diplomacy required restraint. Tessara stayed in Salthaven. At first, she rented a room above a sailmaker and reported to Jonas's studio each morning as though remaining in the city were another military assignment. Within 2 weeks, her spare boots appeared beside his door. Within a month, her swords occupied one wall of his rehearsal room, and his shirts began disappearing whenever she wanted something soft to wear after training. Jonas repaired her old siege boots despite claiming the leather had personally insulted him. Tessara taught him to use a saber without endangering nearby furniture. He taught her 6 dances with no ceremonial purpose. She preferred the slowest because it required his hand to remain at her waist. Winter came as rain rather than snow. On the first cold morning, Jonas woke to find Tessara standing beside the window in one of his cream shirts, her braids loose and her green legs bare below the hem. The city roofs shone beneath the storm. "No snow," he said carefully. "I have noticed. The terms of your stay may require clarification." She crossed the room and stopped between his knees where he sat on the edge of the bed. "Do you want me to leave?" she asked. "No." "Then the terms are clear." Jonas placed both hands at her waist. He still waited for the smallest nod before drawing her closer. Tessara gave it, then settled onto his lap and kissed him until rain, clocks, and unfinished lessons became irrelevant. In spring, they opened a school together beside the Tide Pavilion. The sign showed a crossed sword and dance shoe. Soldiers learned balance from Jonas. Dancers learned courage from Tessara. Both learned that trust was not obedience, and that asking permission did not weaken a movement. It made the answer real. People continued telling stories about the untouchable orc warrior. The stories changed with every festival. Some claimed Jonas had been fearless. Others said Tessara had fallen in love the instant his hand reached her waist. Neither version was true. Jonas had been afraid. He simply cared more about her answer than his fear. Tessara had not fallen. She had leaned backward knowing he would catch her and kept one foot beneath herself so they could carry the weight together. Years later, they still performed the tide dance at the opening of every festival. The stage turned. The blades crossed. Jonas's hair silvered at the temples, and Tessara added new copper links to her braids for the life she continued choosing. At the final passage, she always turned her back to him. His hand always waited beside her waist, and no matter how many thousands watched, Tessara always gave the answer for herself. "Hold me."